Hello, everyone. You are about to hear a brief retelling of the movie Victor Frankenstein. Enjoy the movie. Our hero spent his whole life in the circus, and the role in the corpse he had was unenviable. The nameless hunchback was beaten, kicked, and abused in every possible way. For the amusement of the audience, when they performed, the kid practiced medicine. Reading books on anatomy, Jester escaped from the cruel reality, because even in the hour of rest he was humiliated by cruel circus performers. But one day the future savior of the hunchback appeared at the performance, the boy himself with pleasure watching the performance of the beautiful gymnast Lorelei. This is the only bright spot in the darkness of his circus life. But here the rope broke and the girl collapsed on the sand. The hunchback and another spectator ran up to her. Apparently a doctor, because he immediately determined what bones were broken in the body of the gymnast. For her to be able to breathe again, it is necessary to set the bones of the sternum, and one precise blow saved the girl's life. The man is amazed that this genius is dressed in a clown outfit. Victor Frankenstein is determined to save the young man and take him away from the circus. The injured gymnast was taken away from the arena and the performance continued, while the hunchback's scientific books were torn up and burned so that he would not even think of running away. The poor man was thrown into a cage, but he did not stay there long. At night, Victor returned to free the prisoner with a powerful magnet and a lockpick. The circus owner tried to stop him, but was punched in the face. The circus performers chased after the fugitives, spitting fire and throwing knives at them. A human rat took them at gunpoint, but using his wits, Victor forced the knife thrower to kill the freak. Eventually cornered, the fugitives were able to hide in the sewers. The savior brought the hunchback into the laboratory and demanded that he take off his coat. Victor fetched a pot and a pump. He forcefully pinned the poor man against a column and ripped off his shirt. Victor stuck a syringe into the guy and began to suck out the pus that had collected in his pus bag. The contents of the pot flew into bystanders. Victor didn't stop there. He straightened his guest and put a corset on him to prevent the muscles and bones from returning to their usual position. Enough of this guy walking like a letter G. Victor pointed out to the stranger where his bedroom was. He could stay here to live and should introduce himself as Igor Straussman, which was the name of the neighbor who hardly ever showed up here. For the first time in a long time, Igor was able to take a shower and cut his tangled hair. Turns out he wasn't a freak. The circus owner told Inspector Turpin that the hunchback had escaped, cleaned out his safe, and killed one of the circus performers. Turpin is not a fool and realized that the hunchback was forcibly locked up, and if he killed someone, it was in self-defense. But then the inspector found the fugitive's self-portrait and something else in a red bag. Turpin immediately put out a bolo on the hunchback. Victor left his new neighbor with clothes and money, himself in class. Going out on the balcony and looking at London, Igor felt free for the first time in his life. He immediately went in search of the hospital where Lorelei had been admitted. In a filthy room, beds were stacked. On one of them lay an injured gymnast. Igor paid the nurse to give her all the medicine she needed. On the way back, he saw dozens of posters with his face and the face of his savior. A few months ago, a scientist amputated limbs of dead animals, and today an inspector found a torn-off paw of a lion in the circus. Turpin is a deeply religious man, and these all seem like sinful acts. A distraught Igor shows his friend a poster that says he is a murderer. Victor reassures him, because the police are looking for a pathetic nameless hunchback, and that creature no longer exists. Finally, during dinner, Victor confesses that he is a medical school student, but his professors suffer from feeble-mindedness, not like his talented neighbor. Then at the circus, he searched for the bodies of dead animals. Victor believes that death is reversible. Victor showed his colleague the eyes of a man who died 3 months ago. A special liquid will help convert electrical energy into biological energy. Attaching the eyes to the Lazarus plug, Victor began to spin the dynamo, and suddenly the electric current revived them. Igor noticed that the scientist had connected the nerves incorrectly, so the eyes did not move in the same way. Victor was once again convinced that he had taken in just the right person. He began to bring his assistant different organs and body parts for experiments. One day Igor saw Aurelia being taken away from the hospital. She had a patron. Friends came to the scientific club. There Victor got drunk and began to tell women about unusual fertilization. Suddenly Igor saw Lorelei, but she did not recognize him, or rather not at once. Approaching the guy, she still recognized him as the man who had saved her life. The girl pointed to one Baron. She is his lady in public, but in general he prefers the company of men. The conversation was interrupted by Victor. He began to boast that he and his friend are on the threshold of the great discovery. However, Lorelei is frightened by the games with death, but what opportunities it opens. A murdered man will be able to look into the eyes of his killer. A warrior caught in battle will return to the ranks. A joyful Victor decided to finally show the monster he had been working on in the basement. The room looks like a small factory, and in the middle on a table lay Gordon. The monster was in pieces. Victor has revived him, but so far Gordon can't move and only has enough charge for half an hour. Tomorrow they will show their creation to the scientific community. At the demonstration, Igor invited Lorelei's audience. Besides her, 7 other people came. An excited Victor showed the audience a piece of meat with a bunch of wires, mostly chimpanzees with a dash of other exotic animals. Igor yanked the switch, but only flies flew out of the rotting carcass. The presentation fails, but Victor doesn't give up and increases the amperage, and eventually the corpse comes back to life. By then, only Victor's rich classmate Finnegan was left in the audience. Suddenly the monster electrocuted the scientist, became furious, and ran down the college corridors. Igor found Gordon in the anatomy room. The cornered homunculus attacked him. The two of them were on the verge of death, and instead of saving his comrade, the scientist grabbed Gordon. But the only thing he could do was bludgeon his creature with a fire extinguisher. But Finnegan is delighted with what he has seen and is ready to sponsor the mad scientist to conduct new experiments. They must create a man, a new Prometheus. Although the assistant is terrified by the idea. Now Victor points him in his place and forces him to work against his will. Visiting the scene of the accident, the inspector comes to Frankenstein's house. Turpin guesses who opened the door for him. Victor has gathered about what happened at the college, and the inspector demands to provide him with reports on all experiments for the last year, otherwise he will conduct a search. To which Victor begins to sneer at Turpin because of his faith. People like him have always stood in the way of progress, because scientific discoveries can shake confidence in divine power. Lorelei asks Igor to convince the scientist to give up this scheme, but the guy wants to support his savior. To Victor came his father. Dissatisfied with the fact that his son dropped out, he dishonors the mouth of Frankenstein's. The man hit his son and walked away. Igor felt sorry for his friend and decided to help him with his new project. In order for the human body to live long enough, they will need a huge amount of energy, and they can get it only thanks to lightning, and for the creature to withstand such a load, they will put in it 2 pairs of lungs and 2 hearts. The inspector hasn't been given a search warrant, but she's obsessed with finding out what Frankenstein is hiding in his basement. It's time to put Prometheus back together, but Igor has asked to go to the ball with Lorelei. The couple danced and secluded themselves behind closed doors. When Igor returns, he finds that the Scotland Yards are trying to break down the door and break into Frankenstein's house. The guy went inside through a secret entrance. He needs to find a pickaxe to break the lock and get out of here through the sewers, but instead he found the frozen corpse of the real Igor Straussman, who died 3 months ago. At that moment an inspector entered the room and followed Igor. He took the madman at gunpoint and promised that history would forget about him and his crazy experiments, but Victor knocked the torpedoes out of his hands on the gun. A struggle ensued between them. Eventually the inspector lost an arm and became blind in one eye, but he managed to notice that the fugitives had fled in a carriage belonging to Finnegan. The rich man offers them to hide in his castle in Scotland. Igor still cannot come to his senses, because his colleague did not hesitate to cut out Straussman's eyes, and maybe even killed him. He no longer intends to support Victor in his madness, but according to the scientist he created Igor. Now he is handing over his creator. When Victor left, Finnegan ordered to capture Igor. He knows too much, he cannot be released. Prometheus and other creations he intends to use as a weapon against Frankenstein, he will get rid of as soon as he is done. The bound Igor was thrown into the Thames, but his circus past helped him to free himself from the ropes. Despite his injuries, the inspector is still obsessed with catching Frankenstein, but he was suspended from duty and advised to improve his psychological health. Lorelei was leaving her lover. Igor still has his friend's watch. It came to Victor when he was 10 years old and belonged to his brother Henry. One winter night they went to play in the woods, and suddenly a blizzard struck. Only Victor managed to survive it. After a few weeks, Igor was going to go to help his friend, because it was he who gave him a new life. In the meantime, Victor had assembled his creation piece by piece and was getting ready to revive it. Igor arrived at the castle. Lorelei volunteered to distract people so that he could pass by them unnoticed. Turpin was already waiting for the girl at the carriage. He intends to stop Satan's accomplice. Igor climbed up the cliff to the castle and found that Victor had a large team working on him, a huge creature moving on chains. Victor is happy to see his friend, and he doesn't care at all that Finnegan is going to kill him. The main thing is that he will immortalize his name. The name of the man who changed the world. Igor guessed that the scientist's desire to beat death was caused by guilt before his brother, because it was Victor's idea to play in the snow. According to Victor, he took a life then, and now he must create a new one. Despite his entreaties, Victor intends to finish the experiment. A thunderstorm began and Prometheus was lifted to the sky. A balloon flew high up, which immediately caught a powerful lightning charge. One more movement and the entire energy flow was absorbed by a soulless creature, woven from the remains of the dead. Prometheus breathed and moved his fingers, but suddenly the balloon was struck by another bolt of lightning. The equipment overloaded and exploded. Finnegan and most of the workers were killed. Turpin climbed the tower and accused the scientist of flirting with the devil. At this point, Prometheus broke free and went to meet his maker. Victor stretched out his arms to it. The madman called the monster his brother, but it froze in place with a blank, lifeless stare. Turpin wounded the creature in the arm. It became angry and began to strangle Victor. The inspector continued firing. The monster threw the scientist aside and he hung over the abyss. Turpin ran out of ammunition and the monster killed him with a single swing of its arm. Finally, Victor realized that he had to destroy his creation. First he and then Igor stabbed the monster through, but that didn't stop the monster. Victor jumped on it and stabbed the carcass with sharp debris, and Igor finished Prometheus with an electric shock and stabbed him in the heart with another iron. Then Victor remembered that the monster had two hearts. It pounced on its creator, but the scientist was able to pierce the second heart, finally forcing the monster to stop. In the morning, Igor came to his senses and saw Lorelei, who gave him a letter from Victor. He would no longer pester his friend with his crazy projects, at least not until he realized where they had gone wrong, and Igor was the scientist's greatest creation.